there was, we had talked about this prior to the show, northern Massachusetts near the New Hampshire border, there seemed to have been for a period of, I guess, a week or so, a fluctuation of some activity.
Sometimes it depends on the amount of investigators also. If you've got the people to cover the cases, you get the exposures. So,
many times the witnesses are reluctant to come forward. There was a very interesting report in the Gardner newspaper about a flyover, a very slow flyover of a father and daughter in Gardner.
observing an object.
Observing an object very large that flew over them very, very slowly. They heard the rumble of the object. They could see details on the underside. Somehow they called the newspaper and reported it, but when it came to having the case investigated, they wanted nothing to do with us.
The people who reported
Yes.
Do you find that that's a common?
It's not common, but it's so intriguing that we wonder why. And if you're watching out there, please give us a call.
I've always been intrigued by, TV shows, or like way back when I was growing up, That's Incredible was a show that was very big on these type of topics. And then, of course, the movies came out, Close Encounters, which brought to, their interpretation of where all those missing pilots from, I guess, the Bermuda Triangle come back at the end of the movie and stay for long terms of time. Do you find that to be fact or fiction, or maybe a little bit of both? That do people stay for a long, unexplained amount of time, or is it pretty much a day or time-wise of those that are experiencing these?
Well, that's one of the forms. We call them missing time cases. The Travis Walton case, which you showed a segment on, was a missing time case with multiple witnesses.
Right, and to be more specific, the time interval is usually very short. There have been some cases in which the person claims that they've been gone for days, but we have no corroboration, and that's part of the investigative process. The Bermuda Triangle, by the way, is baloney. So you can cross that
I went
off.
to Bermuda on my honeymoon, and we had to go through some part of it, and we came back. So.
There is a lot of natural weather phenomena there. Because I used to fly as a flight engineer, and we hit some pretty rough weather to a point where I was praying, and it was just a natural phenomenon.
That brings up another aspect of the situation. There is so much out there in the media that is really not true, and that includes books and television and people making claims, that we, as trying to do a decent investigative job, are inundated with nonsense. And it's very difficult to get a straight story now from a person who's had an experience because of all the media contamination.
Right.
But much of the material that you'll see out there should be taken with a grain of salt and is very questionable.
How often, when calls do come in that you might have to investigate, more often than not, are you coming across more bogus sightings or?
Not in my case. I know in the cases I've investigated, 95% they're telling the truth, because you try to trip them up. And
right. What kind of questions would you do to, say, trip someone up? Or how would you weed
try
out
for consistencies. You ask the story, and then you change the story when you ask the question again, and they correct you and tell you, no, it wasn't like that, it was like this, and so forth.
Yeah. Hoaxes are very few and far between. What we mostly get are misidentifications of conventional things and conventional things seen under unusual circumstances. So people report them with all good intent and goodwill as something strange to them, and it's our job to try to classify the object as something conventional.
Now, has the, I know it's always been, like, going back to Roswell, it's always been, that's where the big government cover-ups have rooted from. Do you ever have any cooperation at all with local, Army or Air Force who might have verified or just automatically dismiss on sightings that may have flown overhead or close to?
I've never had very good luck with military installations, but usually police, local police, and that type of to try to find out what's occurring. But as far as the military goes, I haven't had really any cooperation from them.
And that's my experience as well. As soon as they find out you're a civilian, then they just won't cooperate in any sense.
The trick is to hide that, get a little green tag and run around and flash it really quick. You had mentioned the police before. I can imagine when this type of event started back in the 40s, police would have been kind of, go back to your sandwich, you're seeing stuff. And now, as we're getting closer and closer, or the years are, we're now into the 90s, I'm assuming that they're getting a little more cooperative and a little more
well, they are, and
reliable.
a lot of the television shows are a lot more credible, and so it's accepted more, I think, than it was back then. They don't laugh at us as much anymore as they used to, especially when you talk about the beings. It was bad enough talking about the craft,
Right.
but when you talked about the beings, wow.
Let's talk about the beings for a little bit. Again, I'm going to use Roswell as a reference because I think a lot of our viewers will recognize Roswell itself as the main thing that started it all in this hemisphere. It started out as what they have claimed, the Army's claimed, as an air balloon, and I personally don't think it's an air balloon. I think it's something out there. But then they started talking about the bodies lying all over the place and the beings that were aboard. Do you believe, personal opinion, as far as that is actually the case, that the government was able to successfully maintain or hide away a UFO at the time?
In my personal opinion, I do not believe that that's the case. I believe that the Air Force explanation on Roswell is correct, believe it or not. And this is not based on what the Air Force is telling us. It's based on independent investigation by individuals that are associated with various UFO organizations and have decided to delve into the events as they happened.
Jules is getting something from his briefcase. I don't know if this is dissension in the ranks here, but
it may very well be.
I think it's just like a fairy tale. Everybody's got.
This is a letter from one of our colleagues from Barry Goldwater, and because over the years we've heard about the bodies that were supposedly at.
Then there was that video, the autopsy video that came out.
Right.
Hoax.
But, so you may be able to read into this thing, but I don't know if you want to take a look at it or you want me to read it or whatever. But
this is dated 1981 to Mr. Graham. Who is Mr. Graham? This was...
he's one of our colleagues.
For a local colleague or out in California?
Right.
Dear Mr. Graham, first let me tell you that I have long ago given up acquiring access to the so-called Blue Room at Wright-Patterson, as I have had a long string of denials from chief after chief, so I've given up. In answer to your questions, one is essentially correct. I don't know of anyone who has access to the Blue Room, nor am I aware of its contents, and I am not aware of anything having been relocated. I can't answer your question 6. In fact, I can't find anyone who would answer it. To tell you the truth, Mr. Graham, this thing has gotten so highly classified, even though I will admit there is a lot of that has been released. It is just impossible to get anything on it. I am returning your papers because I know they are of value to you. What is the Blue Room?
Well,
do we know
see who signed that?
Barry Goldwater, signed
Right.
Barry Goldwater.
Right. Well, that was supposedly the room where the bodies were kept. And they claimed that there was, some of the stories were that there was one that was alive for a while. So, but we also have another, Len Stringfield out in Ohio. He specialized in the landing cases with beings, and he's got quite a bit of material about people he's spoken to and letters and autopsy reports, and so I don't know what Joe thinks about that.